Welcome to the Unsupported Report. This is a brand new weekly show and article that's going to be diving into unsupported games that are rated by Valve on the Steam Deck. Our goal here is to test the games out, make sure they're actually unsupported for a good reason, and if not, well, we report on it. On top of that, we'll go into how we could get these games running if there is some minor issue with them, and there is a good chunk of games that can run on the Steam Deck with a couple of tweaks here and there. Each episode will contain 2 to 3 games, and some of these games may not even be listed on the Steam store anymore. Regardless, we want to look into each unsupported game and see why they're unsupported and report on whether they're actually playable or not. So join us for our first episode as we dive into the first 3 games on our list: Batman Arkham Origins, Tabletop Simulator, and Dark Souls Prepare to Die Edition. And before we get into our games today, if you want to see more videos like this, hit that like and subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified as soon as our next video goes live. Now, the whole Batman Arkham series has been quite an interesting one to actually try out on the Steam Deck, with 2 of the games actually being labeled as unsupported. However, in this case, I want to take a look at Batman Arkham Origins, and I can confidently say that there is no reason this should be unsupported. Without any changes, the game runs at a flawless 60 frames per second, and no change is actually needed. It just runs extremely well. I saw no dips in this performance, no issues with controls. Even when I was in the open world areas, there was just no issues when it came to actually playing the game. I didn't actually have any issues while playing the game, but I wanted to check ProtonDB to see if other users had any issues on their own. Now, the only one that really stood out to me was the Killer Croc actually disappearing or turning invisible during the first boss fight. But there are also reports that are just saying that it runs perfectly out of the box and that it's the audio that cuts in and out, but no mention of Killer Croc disappearing. So this might still be a thing, but from my experience, I didn't have those kinds of issues. Even still, I would say that the game probably deserves a playable badge at this point, or even verified just based on its performance. It runs perfectly out of the box, and there might be some issues in that first boss fight, but there shouldn't be any problems otherwise. Valve labeled that the reason that the game is unsupported is that they're working on support for the Steam Deck, so it's kind of just their general answer for games that they either haven't tested yet or ran into some minor issues that they were like, nope, can't be playable. But I don't see any reason why this game would not be either playable or verified depending on their standards. If you're going to play the game on the Steam Deck, I don't think you should have any issues with it, but I do recommend trying ProtonGE because that might fix the Killer Croc problem if you're coming up into it, since none of the issues on ProtonDB lists that if they're using ProtonGE, Killer Croc vanishes. As for Batman Arkham Origins Online, that service has been completely discontinued by Warner Brothers, so it's not going to matter whether you're playing on Steam Deck or a desktop PC with Windows. You're not going to be able to use the online modes regardless. Next up, we have Tabletop Simulator, and this is one of my personal favorite games to play. Just like Batman Arkham Origins, Tabletop Simulator is pretty much fantastic on the Steam Deck. It easily hits 90 frames per second in most games, and including some custom ones like Monopoly and official ones like Poker. There is some extra battery drain when looking at the table on certain angles, and some custom games are going to be heavier than others because this is all workshop, so there might be some workshop games that have thousands of set pieces when some might only have like 20 to 50, but it's ultimately going to be very playable and sticks to 90 frames per second with a battery drain of around 4.5 to 5 hours. The biggest issue I could see with Tabletop Simulator is its control scheme though. The game technically supports controllers, but it is not that great to actually use a controller to play it. The native gamepad controls just feel like they're missing a lot to them, and it's really just easier to play with either a mouse and keyboard or using the official Tabletop Simulator control scheme, which just translates the mouse and keyboard controls over to the gamepad using Steam input. This was really the best way to play the game, and I really like the official control scheme. It feels like it has everything that I could need to actually get it working. The one thing I would change maybe is the D-pad having inverted up and down controls, so panning the camera up or pressing the D-pad up button actually pans the camera downwards. I'm not a big fan of inverted controls like that, so I would change it. However, if you want to try the native gamepad controls, all you have to do is go to the options in Tabletop Simulator and go to the controls tab and check on the controller box. However, you cannot navigate the main menu of the game with a controller, so you are going to have to use a touchscreen, or you're going to have to change the control scheme a little bit so that the right trackpad, or the left trackpad if you prefer, controls as a mouse. However, for the most most part, I ran into no issues playing Tabletop Simulator on the Steam Deck, and I really enjoyed it. Just like Batman Arkham Origins, it is rated unsupported, and it's Valve saying that they're working on adding support for the Steam Deck. Then looking over on ProtonDB, it seems that it's a little bit finicky. There are some issues that have been coming up where changing the UI scale will completely break the game's graphics, and in the past it was not possible to get beyond the main menu on older versions of Proton, so it seems like this was actually fixed with Proton 9 or 10. As for the UI scale, that one I would probably not change. It honestly is okay for me in its current state, and I didn't have a problem with it, but I can see it being a little bit too small. However, this is a giant game that's really based around tabletop games or board games, or card games. So there's going to be a lot of text that you have to read. So if you're going to play Tabletop Simulator on the Steam Deck, I recommend just leaving it as it is. Don't change a thing, just get in and play it. Use the default Proton that's being used with it, or you could set it directly to Proton GE's latest update. But I do recommend just keeping it as is because it does have a native Linux build and it does work perfectly fine on the Steam Deck. And finally, we have Dark Souls Prepare to Die Edition. This is the original version of Dark Souls 1 that released on PC and is not available in the store anymore, and you should probably get Dark Souls Remastered if you are interested in playing Dark Souls 1. However, as someone who owns the original game, I wanted to test it out for myself to see if that unsupported rating was legitimate. And when all is said and done, I would say that yes, it is. Now, actually loading in, starting the game, getting into it, and fighting is all really easy to do. The game is locked to 30 frames per second and just runs pretty well for the most part. It recognizes the controller, I can attack enemies, move around, dodge. It is, again, locked to 30 frames per second, which doesn't always feel the best, but that's just part of the older version of the game, and by all accounts, it is still very playable. However, this port just wasn't that great. Dark Souls Remastered is significantly better in this sense. There were times when I was playing where if there was a lot of stuff happening in front of me, like if a dragon is coming at me with a bunch of fire coming out of it, it will completely tank the frame rate and actually cut it in half, dropping it down to 15 frames per second. This is so jarring, and it was enough for me to say that it actually ruined the experience a little bit. On top of that, it just feels off. It feels awkward to control. Even though it is technically running as it should, it just doesn't feel that great. Now, I can see why some people might gravitate towards this if they already own it instead of getting the remastered version because, they don't want to spend the extra money on a game they already technically have. But the remastered version makes a lot of big improvements where I would say getting that is going to be worth it. Still, Dark Souls Prepare to Die Edition is technically playable on the Steam Deck. As per Valve's rating, we also have another Valve is working on adding support for the game, and it's just going to be another cookie cutter response. Over on ProtonDB, there were actually a lot of issues that were mentioned here and there, but there is a fix that they talked about that you can actually use to not only get rid of the frame rate lock, but also stabilize the frame rate. By using the mod DSFix, which is a wrapper DLL that allows us to adjust the settings of Dark Souls that aren't actually in the game, we can fix a lot of the issues that we're going to come into. All you have to do is download the mod from Nexus Mods, go ahead to where Dark Souls is installed, and just place the D-Input 8 DLL in there. After that, head back to Steam, go to your properties for Dark Souls Prepare to Die Edition, and put in the launch option, WineDLL overrides equals dinput 8 equals n, B command. Once that's done, you should be able to start the game and it should run perfectly. There are also some other little tweaks that they talked about, like using power tools to disable SMT, but I would say just using DSFix is going to be enough for a majority of people. Just like Batman Arkham Origins, the online capabilities of Dark Souls Prepare to Die Edition have been discontinued, so they wouldn't be working even if you're playing on a desktop PC. And those are the 3 games that we had to show today. Now, each one of them is technically playable and enjoyable on the Steam Deck. There were some minor issues that were accounted for here and there, but nothing I would say that really makes any of them worthy of that unsupported label. Still though, that's why we're doing this. We want to check out these games to see if they're actually playable, or how we can get them to a playable state, or if they really just can't be played on the Steam Deck. However, my verdict would be that each of these games is playable on the Steam Deck and deserves at least the playable badge, with Batman Arkham Origins specifically deserving that verified badge. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified as soon as our next video goes live. And a huge thank you to our patrons. You guys are awesome. See you next time.